Welcome back to today's episode of Discern. I'm Ross, and this week going to be joined by my friend Nick Pitts. Welcome back, Nick.
Hey, good to see you, Ross.
We're going to be hitting the news and getting into what's happening around the world, starting with what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. So as of the taping today, I'm going to read the latest from the Wall Street Journal, and we can visit a bit about what's going on. U.S. officials say they expect a Russian attack on Ukraine in the next few days that could involve a broad combination of jet fighters, tanks, ballistic missiles, and cyber attacks, with the ultimate intention of rendering the country's leadership powerless. These officials say prospects for averting war now appear very dim, while adding that the Biden administration will continue to try to keep open the window for diplomacy. So we're filming this on Friday, February 18th. By the time this airs, there may have actually been further developments. But as of today, Nick, can you just kind of catch us up for our audience? What is happening around these tensions? What's the background? What's going on?
Yeah, so what we continue to see is that despite their claims, Russia continues to bolster their forces on the Ukrainian border. President Putin earlier this week said that he was going to pull back and retreat some forces from Ukraine and their border, and that is proven not to be the case. There are certain reports out that he's actually increased his troop presence up to 150,000. And so I think it's generally accepted that no one really has a great understanding what's going on and what's the compelling factor within President Putin's mind. But there's at least two common theories that are running around right now as to why he, one, might invade Ukraine, or two, might pull back and just continue to have these provocations, but not necessarily invade. We'll start with the idea that he possibly could invade. And that's probably the most explicit that he made. Last year, he released a pretty lengthy paper, and in it, he talked about the historic ties between Kiev and between Moscow, and how there is this growing desire within him to unify these forces once again and to unify these countries and their civilians. It's important to know that there's a strong Russian presence already within Ukraine, and so this would just be seen as a move to try to solidify that. Now, Ukraine also has a pretty strong social solidarity movement that's happening right now, where upwards of 2/3 of their adults are ready and willing to fight. And so we'll see how that goes. They've learned the lesson after 2014 and the annexation of Crimea, and they are ready and prepared should President Putin invade. Now, on the flip side, though, there's a point that some are saying that President Putin will not invade. These are just provocations, and that he is simply, this is being referred to as Problem 24. Problem 24, the mentality is that President Putin got his eyes set on the next presidential election in Russia in 2024. And it's his desire at that election to become a lifetime president. And so what we're seeing today with regard to these troop movements and these statements that are coming from Russian government officials is what's called patriotic mobilization. You see, when Putin first came to power in early 2000s, he could point to the economy, he could point to a strong market and prosperity as a reason to give him credibility within the Russian people. Today, that's not the case, far from it. And so what he needs to appeal to now is that it is us against the world, and I am the strong man that's going to protect you against the world. Hence the reason why you're seeing these provocations, but he also recognizes that it has great limits, so he will be the paper tiger that flexes, but that will not go into Ukraine, because he realizes the NATO forces are beginning to solidify right now against those provocations should he follow through with them.
Can you speak to how NATO has involved itself in this, and kind of traditionally, again, just thinking of our audience across various ages and demographics, they may not be as familiar with when these world conflicts happen. Who is NATO again, and what are they doing involved, and how does America related to what's happening over there right now?
Yeah, so NATO is this alliance of countries that's headed by the United States. That really the most basic tenet you need to know about NATO is that if you attack one NATO member country, all of the NATO countries are going to come to have your back. We most recently saw this in early 2000s when the U.S. went into Iraq. we had NATO forces joining us in that battle. So Ukraine finds itself either looking to either the west or they're looking to the east. President Putin and Russia wants them to continue to look toward the east to be that North Star, you might say, that their greater affinity for and emphasis needs to be on interests within the east. And now but it appears as though Ukraine and Ukrainian officials are moving towards looking toward the west, which is wanting this desire to join NATO, this desire to be shaped and influenced by Western forces. And so what we're seeing is that there's this mix between who's going to get Ukraine's attention. And with Russia, especially with Ukraine right on the border, what they're most concerned about is that's the least thing they want to happen, which is NATO forces in the United States to be their next door neighbor should Ukraine decide to join NATO.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Knowing that most of our audience are American believers, and certainly we have some worldwide viewers that would be impacted by this as well. How should an American view what's happening right now? Is this, I think one of the problems that often happens is, well, it's this thing away from us. How is that actually going to apply? Is that affecting our troops? Does that affect our families? And really specifically, I think my question is, how should we be involved and or pray for this?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think very clearly in the biblical narrative, you see it all throughout the book of Isaiah. It's increasingly important to call evil for what it is. And whenever you're talking about President Putin, we need to recognize it for what it is, that he's an evil man. This is a man that has assassinated his enemies. This is a man that continues to level authoritarian measures over the Russian people. And he's currently using the Russian church right now to be able to advance his particular interests. You can go into some Russian Orthodox churches and you'll actually see stained glass of him and Stalin, etc., adorning the walls of a particular church. And what we're seeing from the Ukrainian perspective is probably a former Ukrainian leader is now, Christianity Today wrote about him, and he gave this comment that we are on the side of truth and justice always prevail. One of the things that I'm consistently praying for amongst this Ukrainian-Russian conflict right now is I'm praying for peacemakers to rise up right now. I think it's very clear on both sides of the aisle. There's a desire not to panic, to de-escalate the situation. And there is a great need for peacemakers to rise up and be individuals that recognize that peace is not made by just restoring the status quo, but peace is a positive, and peace it requires agency and work in order to be able to restore justice and righteousness in a system. And so I'm praying for those Ukrainian and Russian men and women of peace, that they would rise up, exercise their influence, and similar to Mordecai, channel their influence in such a way that it might not only bring about peace, but also prosperity throughout the region.
I think to pray for the citizens of both nations to just find God's truth and to be able to see through deception that's happening, and to see what He wants them to see in the midst of this, and ultimately that God would be glorified through that. So I love the notion here to pray for peace, and that glorifies God in that process. So that's definitely, we'll keep an eye on that as we continue to track these stories, and we'll be looking at other stories unfolding around the world the rest of this week. So we'll see everybody back here tomorrow on Discern.